Hi, welcome. I'm Frank Abasiekong and this is Console Craft Studio, where we learn everything filmmaking. Today I'll be sharing with you 4 factors that will help you create depth and dimension in your shots. Let's get right into it. Alright, welcome back. Factor number 1 is distance. Distance is very important. The distance between the subject and the background, the distance between the subject and the camera, the distance between the subject and every other subject or object within that frame. When you're trying to create depth in your shot, you first need your subject away from the background, possibly away from any other subject that you wouldn't really want to be part of that space or that line with the subject. So you take the subject away from the wall, let the subject stay off the background. It's the same rule with trying to kill shadows or trying to wash off shadows from falling on the wall. You take the subject away from the wall. If you want to create depth, distance is key. Every other thing that we'll be talking about will build on the fact that you have appropriate distance. Tip number 2 is light. Okay, so for those of you who have possibly attended some cinematography classes before, or maybe you've seen 1 or 2 of my videos on exposure and maybe depth of field or something, then you will be a bit conversant with what I'm about to talk about right now. First, you understand that aperture has a lot to do with depth of field. Aperture has a lot to do with whether the depth of field will look shallow or actually great. Okay, so that exposure itself, the wider the light that enters the camera, the wider your aperture opening, the more shallow the depth of field, and then the more narrow your aperture opening, the more great the depth of field. So, but that is one side. But now let's look at it in a very different light as well. In the first place, without light we cannot see. Note that without light we cannot see. So it means if your background is entirely dark, or your foreground or something, if everywhere is entirely dark and just the subject is there, there is absolutely no way you can create depth in that shot, because it's just the subject there. We really don't know the distance between the subject and the background and all that. So we need light. If you should just light up a candle in that dark background, you will see an entire difference, because the candle will be able to show people that there is some form of depth, there is some form of distance between the subject and the background. So being able to light your subject and light the background and light everything separately is a wonderful way of creating depth. Tip number 3 is the lens. You need a good lens, preferred lens for such kind of situation. So first of all, what type of lens? I have also made a video on the 3 basic types of lenses and their different functions. So we know that this falls into one of the functions of one of the type of lenses. So if you go for a good lens like a telephoto lens of let's say an 85mm, the higher your focal length range, that's the higher the telephoto abilities of the lens, the better it can actually create depth in your shot. Telephoto lenses actually just create shallow depth of field. So if you are using a telephoto lens, you automatically know you have an advantage. If what you want to achieve is shallow depth of field, then you know with a telephoto lens you can actually get very good shallow depth of field, depending on the range, the focal length of the telephoto lens you're using. So lens is a very important factor as well in creating depth and separation in a shot. So tip number 4 is the foreground. Foreground is a very important area that many people don't explore, but you need to, because applying just something into the foreground kind of create a 3-dimensional look of that image than just basic 2-dimensional thing. So we are always trying to see how we can turn our 2-dimensional screens and perspective to a 3-dimensional look, and adding anything like a flower or anything at all, any kind of props or even any subject to the foreground, that helps create some kind of depth between the camera and the subject. This is also why over the shoulder shots seem very special and unique. It has a way of adding a 3rd dimension to the shot, to your close-up shot. So most people would always have someone sit in front and then the frame and over the shoulder shot on a main subject, meaning the person now appears in the foreground in between the camera and the subject, creating that depth between the camera and the subject. In my video link down below on composition, I had discussed on frame in a frame. That is one very fine way of working with the foreground, creating something in your foreground, just to create depth and dimension and separation between the camera and the subject. Alright guys, these are my 4 factors that would help you create depth and dimension in your shots. You really need to try them out and let me know how well they worked out for you. If there is anyone you've used and it worked out for you, please share it down in the comments so that all of us can also share in your wealth of experience and knowledge. If you love this video so far, please give us a thumbs up, and also please subscribe to my channel. That helps me a whole lot. Don't forget to click the bell icon to stay informed of when I upload my next video.